Welcome to Hustle and Flow with Heather Hubbard, episode number 85. Hi, I'm Heather Hubbard, and I was a litigator, partner, and practice group leader at an AmLaw 200 firm. I know what it takes to rise to the top. I also know all too well the toll it can take on your personal life. So how do you shine bright without burning out? How do you embrace your ambition without selling your soul? You're listening to the Hustle and Flow podcast. Welcome back. I am your host, Heather Hubbard, and today we're going to be talking about setting client expectations. But before we do that, I wanted to give you a heads up that this week is the very last week to sign up for Life and Law Live, and that's assuming there are seats available. If there are any left, as you know, I record these in advance. If there are any left, you have until September 27 to register. We will then be moving forward and preparing for the group that we have. We only have a few seats left. It is going to be in Phoenix, November 8th and 9th, and it's basically a planning extravaganza. So I will be helping you plan for life and law. We integrate everything for 2019. So it is all about really getting you set up for success, so that you have thought through your vision, your goals, your strategy, and you have a fully mapped out plan so that you can hit the ground running come January 1. And excited to share with you that we also just got it accredited for a little over 10 hours of CLE credit. Now, in Tennessee, that means it is dual, so it counts for general or ethics, whichever you prefer. And if you are not in Tennessee, let me just tell you how this works. We get it accredited here, and then every other jurisdiction, it is really up to you to send it in. So you will get the uniform certificate. We will sign it. We will say you were there, but it is up to you to get it submitted, and not all jurisdictions will approve it. Although for those who attend my retreats from all over the country, most, to my knowledge, actually do get them submitted. It's just different. Some states automatically acknowledge Tennessee, and so you can just submit those hours. Others, you have to get it approved in advance or get it approved or submit it within a certain amount of days. So just a heads up, you get a bonus of 10 hours, maybe even more, depending on, whether you've got a 50-minute format or a 60. We have 60 minutes in Tennessee, 10 hours of CLE credit to go along with really setting you up to be successful, to be satisfied. We want happy attorneys and successful attorneys. That is what Life and Law Live is all about. So come hang out with us. You can check it out at lifeandlawlive.com. Okay, so let's get into the topic for today. Natalie reached out on my Instagram account and she said, I would love it if you would do a podcast episode on setting client expectations. She also referenced firing clients. We don't have enough time to get into that one today. So we're going to talk about setting clear client expectations on the front end. And if you are like Natalie and there are questions that you would like me to answer or topics you would like me to address, please reach out. My social for Facebook and Instagram, the handle is at Heather Joy Hubbard. So if you're not already following me on those accounts, please do and reach out. Either I will get back with you, someone on my team will get back with you. And this kind of segues, interesting. This segues into the topic. I didn't even think about this, but if you try to reach out on my personal account to talk business, you're not going to get a response, okay? So make sure that you keep all of that on the business accounts. It's one of my ways of setting boundaries. So just a heads up. And it's a way of, setting clear client expectations before we ever get going. So let's just move into that topic now. And maybe I'll talk a little bit more about the social piece. So when does setting client expectations matter? Like, who does this apply to? This applies to everyone, including if you're in-house, right? Because you still have a client. It might be a business partner within your company. If it's a governmental agency, you still have clients in the sense there are people that you are answering to and that you are serving. So setting those expectations it's really important for everyone, even if you don't have your own firm or even if you're not a partner. Now, that said, I always have caveats. If you are a young associate and it's not your file, or it's not your file at all, just know that you do not need to be setting client expectations. That is for the partner to do. And this is, even though you have a client and generally your client is a partner, this really doesn't relate to that either, because there, is a way to do things, address things. And I have been told, I don't know if this is true, I like millennials, but some people feel as though millennials do come in and start setting expectations and boundaries and rules, and that's not the best approach for long-term career success. So we are talking about setting expectations in a way that is going to help you advance your career, but it really is mostly from setting client expectations if the client is an outside client, right? They're hiring you, they are paying you. It's a little bit more nuanced. You got to have a little bit more finesse if it is within a company or somewhere else, because you have to worry a little bit more about those relationships and how things are perceived, because you're not setting the standard, you're not setting the culture. I hope that makes sense. But I do think you'll still get a lot out of this episode. So why are client expectations important? Well, one, it's just clear communication. Any relationship that is based on clear communication from the very beginning is going to be better than one that does not. The second reason why it's important is boundaries. Being able to set those expectations such that you are setting yourself up for success, where you are not getting resentful, where you are not getting angry, where you do not feel like the victim of your law practice. That is why you want to set clear expectations and follow through on them. And then third is it's just good customer service. In the same way that you sometimes hear non-attorneys say that they don't like to do contracts because it seems adversarial. And it's like, we're all friends. If I send someone a contract, it's going to look rude. Actually, if you send a contract, it shows that you respect that relationship and you want to make sure that business does not get in the way of your personal relationship. The same concept holds true with client expectations. If you feel as though you can't set client expectations because it looks rude, it looks, adversarial, just know that that is the same argument that non-attorneys make about not having contracts. The truth is, setting expectations is a sign of respect for both parties, because you're allowing everyone to say, okay, we know where we're starting from and we know what's allowed, we know what's not allowed, and this is going to allow us to have a much better working relationship. So hopefully I don't have to convince you anymore that client expectations are important, but those are 3 really good reasons. And honestly, I'm going to throw this one in too as number 4. I think it's actually really, really good customer service. When I hire someone and they can provide me with a clear roadmap or guideline of what to expect and how to interact with them, it just provides me assurance that they've got their what together, that I have hired someone who is the real deal. And it allows me to know, oh, okay, that's the way that they prefer I communicate, or that's the way I submit something. That gives me so much more confidence as a client in the person and the company that I hire. And the same is true for you. If you put out client expectations, especially in a way that is documented and systematized, it's going to look really, really good and provide a level of customer service that most clients probably aren't used to expecting or receiving when they hire attorneys. Okay, so I see there being really 4 different stages of places to set client expectations. Okay. So 4 different stages, and the way you want to approach it is a little bit different in each. So let's break that down. I'll go ahead and tell you all 4 of them and then we'll break it down. Okay. So the first one is when someone is a prospect. The second is when you are having that first conversation, whether it's a consult, an interview, whatever that looks like. And then you've got the actual engagement. And then last, you have the matter. So when you are moving forward with them as your client. So 4 different stages. Now, if you are in-house, governmental agency, something like that, those are not the exact stages that you will have, but you can kind of modify it to work for you. All right, so let's start with the prospect phase. How do people find you and how do they interact with you? So for some of you, you might have a social media account, especially if you're a solo attorney. Maybe you are on Facebook, maybe you're on Instagram. Depending on the type of practice you have, or if you're in a bigger firm, you might have a LinkedIn account. In either situation, potential clients might be coming to your website. Maybe they are attending events. Maybe you are networking with them at a conference. Maybe you're meeting them one-on-one. Maybe you're writing articles. Whatever your marketing looks like, that's really the first time that you are communicating with a prospective client. And believe it or not, the way you communicate there is already setting expectations. So let's just use like boundaries, how often you're going to be available to speak with someone. Oftentimes when we're marketing and when we're doing sales, and that's going to move into the next piece related to the consult, we're super available, right? So if you're always saying, hey, call me or email me, like if that's in your article or if that's on your website, like call anytime. Maybe you've got your phone number on there a lot, or that's the call to action that you have. You're asking people to reach out to you and you say, we're super responsive. We'll answer at any time of day or night. We always have someone on call. If you are saying, I'll clear my calendar, right? So let's say you're at an event or you're doing one-on-one and they want to meet on a certain date or to have a discussion. You're like, whatever's on my calendar, don't worry, I'll move it. I'll make time for you. Let's just make this happen. And part of that is because you are really trying to get that business in the door. So you might be super responsive and super available. If they hire you and you don't plan to be just as responsive and just as available and just as willing to clear your calendar for whatever that particular client needs and wants, you're basically setting expectations that you're going to be able to do those things when you know you're not. And that is your fault. Okay. And it's not good customer service, because if stage 1 looks totally different than stage 4, they're going to be upset with you because you didn't really give them the signal that they have to respect your time and that you're not going to be available for any given issue that they want to discuss. So, when they want to call you for the 5th or 6th time to say, where's the update? And they want an update on a daily basis. Even little bitty things related to you're always available by phone and email, or you're willing to move things around. You've already set the tone for them being so important that you will drop anything and everything. Now, I get that that's not the only type of expectation you're trying to set, but I think it's a really important one. You just want to make sure that no matter what stage you're in, you are perfectly aligned and you're being consistent. Another example would be around results. So, let's say that, your marketing, your website, other things like that talk about all of your wins. Well, that's normal. You generally do put down, great results that you got. You typically don't say, here's the really bad results that I've gotten. Even if you're writing articles, though, you might say, who you hire matters, and it's the results that you get. And here's the approach that, we take in order to make this happen. I totally get why you're doing it, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it, but just know that if you're saying that most of your clients get really great results, or that by hiring you, they're going to get a better result than hiring someone else, just know that you're setting the expectation that you are going to deliver good results. So when the lawsuit or the matter then, gets going and something pops up and you're like, well, this is perfectly normal, this happens, it may make sense to you because that's just par for the course. But their first interaction with you was that you get better results than anyone else, and that you aren't going to just, settle or let things slide. They thought that you were the type of attorney that could get whatever result they wanted, right? So just keep that in mind. You want to look at all of your marketing. You want to look at when you're first talking to a prospect, put it through that filter of, am I sending a message that is going to be inconsistent? And to the extent that you're worried that you need to have that marketing, but you also want to make sure that they understand you're not guaranteeing results or that certain things will happen, you can address those in further stages. But using that filter and remembering what you said as you move forward is going to be really important. Otherwise, you have basically set that expectation that you can get results, and that's going to be why they hired you. Okay, so those are just 2 examples, but hopefully you can see the point on that. Okay, let's move to stage 2, which is your consult, your interview, really whatever you want to call it. But it's where the prospect is moving into the place of considering hiring you, right? Like there's actually a conversation around it. It's not mere marketing. And if you're not familiar with the difference between marketing and sales, we covered this in a few different podcast episodes. I believe we talked about it on how to sell without being salesy and the marketing matrix. So if you just go to hustleandflowpodcast.com/directory, you'll be able to find those. You'll just click on the topic business development. And that kind of explains the differences between those. But so the second stage, this consult stage, is really the sell. You can think of this in terms of, in the legal industry, you probably have sales conversations with vendors. So maybe it's an e-discovery vendor. Depending on if you're a solo, you might actually be the one talking to copier vendors, paper vendors, that kind of thing. If you're in big law and you're ever involved in committees or purchasing decisions, it's generally software. But so it's a full-on pitch, but it's different in that it's the sales team. We talk about this a lot on the podcast, but in the legal industry, you do it all. You do the marketing, you do the sales, you do the law, you do the execution, you wear all the hats. It's why you are overwhelmed all the time. So for other companies and industries where they're not crazy like us, they have a sales team. The sales team does not ever deliver the good or the service. They just do sales. And surely you've experienced this. I've experienced it a million times, where the salesperson is always over-promising. And then you're like, this is going to be awesome. And then you sign up, and then you're no longer talking to the salesperson. You're dealing with your customer rep. And they're like, that's not how it works. Or they just don't deliver the same way the salesperson said. And you get so frustrated because you're like, I was sold something and he just wanted the commission, right? Like he just wanted the sale. He didn't actually care about me as a customer. Well, this holds true for lawyers as well. Even though you might be the salesperson and you might be the person that's then going to execute, there's still that tendency in that interview, in that consult, to want to get the business. And so sometimes we tend to overpromise during those conversations. Again, even like with the boundaries, you might be more available than you otherwise would be, or more responsive than you otherwise would be. And when you're talking about, what makes you better, what makes you different, you're probably saying we're efficient. We deliver great results. We are focused on the client. We want to be part of your business. If you go to most websites, every lawyer says the same thing, right? We deliver exceptional services at good prices. I mean, right? Like it's all the same. But here's the thing. If their experience is then different than what you were selling, then you're the one that set up an expectation that you're not living up to. So if you said you're efficient in your billing and then a client gets upset about the bill, you might have just had different definitions of what efficiency looked like, because you might see them as a trouble client and they see you as, having promised something that you're now not following through on. So to make sure that you don't have that tendency to oversell or overcommit, I think it's really important to actually have expectations written down. And you can do this with prospects and consults. I was working with a client recently where we set this up, and they're sending it out even with the prospects so that they don't even have to have these consult calls if the client already knows that that's not going to be a good fit for them. So that's one approach. At the very least, you need to have it for the consult. So don't just have your marketing materials, don't just have your sales materials for that initial pitch. Make sure that you have the expectations as well. And you can think in terms of, where do I get frustrated the most with my clients? Where do I find that they are, maybe it's disrespecting your boundaries. Maybe it's not understanding how the legal process works. Maybe they're calling you nonstop or being unreasonable in their requests or their demands or wanting different results, right? They're upset that you can't get certain things accomplished. Oftentimes, the same issues come up over and over again. So think of it from that perspective. Where do you have a lot of miscommunication or frustration with your clients? Whether you then have a conversation with them or not about it, what are those issues? And then basically, you're kind of going to create like a frequently asked questions, but it's really the expectations. And by going ahead and putting those down, and being able to hand them to the client if you're meeting in person, email it to them if you're not, to just say, here's what you can expect if you hire me. It's going to include things that aren't going to feel great. And the tendency is to not let people know that or to have that conversation because you're like, I'm trying to get the client in the door. I don't want to scare them away. This is when you need to have the conversation, okay? You cannot set expectations after the engagement has started because you already have set the expectations, right? You may not think that you have, but you have. By not communicating them and then trying to shift gears or then trying to set new rules, it just doesn't work because in their minds, they're already expecting something else. So being super clear on the front end is helpful. And here's the thing, if someone is not interested in your rules, your expectations, that's not a good fit to begin with. And so wanting to get them in the door and then like trying to get them on board or change them is kind of like dating someone and saying, I'm only going to let them see my good side now. And I don't like everything about them. There's a lot of red flags. But the longer we move into the relationship, I'll be able to pull them along and convince them that they need to change and that my way is the right way. Okay. We all know that's a terrible idea. So it's true for client expectations as well. When you're doing these consults, when you're doing the sales, when you are first talking to, if you're in-house, your client, you're kind of courting, that's the time to be honest about what the relationship is going to look like. Okay? So that's stage 2. Now let's move into stage 3. You are now at the engagement stage. So they have decided that they like you, they want to hire you. There's still going to be an engagement letter and a retainer, presumably, involved. So they're interested in hiring you, but they've not quite signed on the dotted line. This is stage 3. So this is going to give you another opportunity. The more you repeat yourself, the more likely it is to sink in. As we all know, we're really busy. We sometimes hear things differently than others. Maybe we're focused on something else, so we kind of hear it, but it's not really sinking in. The more you communicate expectations, the more likely it is that they're going to finally catch it and retain it. So when you send that engagement letter out, that is a great time to also send a copy of the expectations again, or put it within the engagement letter itself. I know of several of attorneys who will put in their engagement letter that doing work on nights and weekends involves a higher rate. Now, if you're in big law, you're like, what? Yeah, it's not big law I'm talking about. But if you're a solo or you're at a small firm, you can absolutely do that. And then you've set the stage, you've set that expectation. That's also where you can say, that you have to communicate a certain way. Like you cannot text message me or you cannot call my cell phone if that's a boundary you want to set. It's also the place to say, we don't guarantee results. And Again, like let's say you have a certain type of matter that there's certain issues that come up, saying, this is going to be a long process. And although we're going to do the very best we can, to get you the results you want, please know that this is our business and we are going to do the best we can. We are going to give you updates and monitoring. And that's a great time to say how often that's going to happen, right? Are you doing it monthly? Are you sending out a letter? Is it in your bill? What does that look like? Go ahead and tell them. So either put it in the engagement letter itself or make sure it's an addendum. So go ahead and set the stage as to what that is going to look like to work with you. What are the expectations? Again, I know some people are reluctant to put that in there because they're worried about, well, maybe they then won't sign or what will they think? This is the best time to have this conversation. Do not let them hire you and then you try to set expectations or get upset that they're not the ideal client. Okay? So now, that one was pretty quick, but just a heads up, that is a great place to go ahead and do it. Number 4. We are now in the 4th stage, and that is they've engaged you, right? Like you've got an ongoing matter with them. This is less about setting expectations and more about following through on the expectations that you have already set. This is just as hard as the others. So if you were nervous about when I was telling you about, kind of coming up with like an FAQ and sharing it either when they're a prospect or when you're doing the consult and the sell or even during the engagement, if those make you nervous, you definitely are going to have a hard time setting expectations once the relationship is there. And you're more likely to not actually follow through. So you have to keep to your word. And that's a two-way street, right? So if you said you were going to do certain things, you better be doing it, right? If you say that you're going to provide consistent communication, you better be providing consistent communication. Don't take on so many clients that you're no longer providing the updates you promised. Make sure that you are following through on absolutely everything you said. And if that means setting up systems to make sure that you're doing that, do it. But that's also where when a client goes to, it could be violated an expectation if it's a boundary, but maybe it's they forgot that things are going to take time or you're not always going to have updates or that's not how something works. That's when you're going to be able to refer them back. And it's not like you're, adversarial saying, well, here's what we said. It's just a redirection, right? Like you're correcting. So let's say you're one of the attorneys where it's already been set forth, you've been doing a great job, you've then got it in your engagement letter, that people can't text you or that you don't do work on nights and weekends. If they then text you, you would simply say, hey, just a reminder, I don't do business by text. Please, and whatever it is, email me at whatever during office hours, something like that. And you have to follow through. If you don't follow through, basically you're saying the expectations that I set were not real. Okay. And they're immediately going to ignore all of them, even if you made an exception on one. We're all human. This is what we do. Or if they have an emergency and reach out on a night or a weekend, you can say, just as a reminder, this is going to cost X amount. Do you still want me to proceed? And the answer may be yes. And then they might be like, oh no, I forgot about that. Don't. So again, just make sure that you are following through, both in terms of delivering the expectations that you promised and reminding them of what they are if they're going astray. And that can be really hard, especially if you really like a client. You might build friendships up. And so it's like, oh, well, I need to make exceptions for them because they're my friend. That is definitely the hardest thing for me, but following through is super important. And I guess that kind of leads me back to my social media. So I have clients. If you're in my annual mastermind, you have access to my cell phone and you can text or call, but I don't really do that on nights and weekends. And so no matter how much I like them, no matter how much I know it'll be an easy response, it's really up to me to keep following through on the expectation that they're not going to get one. So I just don't, because that's my job. And I can't get frustrated or resentful if I find myself working 24/7 simply because I set an expectation and I'm no longer following through on it. Similarly, with social media, if someone reaches out to me on my personal page about business, then basically I'm sending the cue that my personal time is the same as my business time, and you can reach out to me in any form or fashion. So you can text message me or you can send me a Facebook message, and that's okay. And so I'm actually setting an expectation that that's not okay. Not that I'm mad about it, but that's not how I'm going to interact. And even if, you reach out to my business page, a lot of times I have team members responding. I may not be the one that responds, and that's consistent with what it's going to look like to work with me. I do very little one-on-one, which is why I don't really do coffees or lunches to see if we're a good fit, because, the price point for working with me in the ways that most people can, it doesn't actually make sense that I would be spending that much time on that. The only way to work with me one-on-one is, basically having already worked with me before. So we've already built that relationship, or we'll do short calls. And so I'm trying to be very consistent with the expectations of what that's going to look like. I always put in my contracts, my terms and conditions, what access will look like. So for example, in my 4-month mastermind, I say, yes, I'm absolutely in those Facebook groups, and I will try to provide responses, but don't expect it's going to be immediate. Sometimes it might even be a few days if, I'm leading an event, and you can't email me or call me or text me. And when you do, I'm going to gently remind you that you got to put it in the Facebook group. And that's my way of following through on those expectations. It's not to be mean. It's not to be rude. It's not about me not valuing someone as a prospect. It's not about me not valuing someone as a client. It's making sure that those expectations are aligned and consistent every step of the way, so that you're not disappointed when something doesn't happen, and I'm not frustrated and resentful for you not adhering to the rules I set, because I'm in charge of those rules, right? Okay, so we've gone a little bit longer than I actually anticipated, but I hope that's been super helpful for you. Get this stuff down, document it, think it through, make it part of your customer service system, make it part of your onboarding, let it be a filter in everything you do in every single stage. And that is going to set you up for success and have clients that you absolutely love. And they're going to love you too, because you're doing exactly what they're expecting. Okay, so Natalie, I hope that was helpful. And everyone else, I hope that was helpful to you as well. We'll just wrap up by saying one last time, it is your last chance to come join me at Life and Law Live in Phoenix. We are closing registration on September 27th, and you can presumably, if you're in Tennessee, you absolutely can get 10 hours of CLE credit. So a little extra bonus to get you to come join me. We're going to have a lot of fun, and I hope to see you there. All right, talk next week. For show notes, downloads, and other free resources, and to keep the conversation going, head on over to hustleandflowpodcast.com. See you there.